Okay, so this week I've been asked to talk specifically about bullying because it's bullying awareness time, so that's what I've been asked to look at. And there is a link to special needs, but not always. So I'm going to do some of the links, but more than that. So one of the things about bullying is that there's both real bullying and perceived bullying. Both hurt just as much. Whether the child is really being bullied or just perceives that they're being bullied is in some ways almost, well, it's not irrelevant, but it affects how you then treat, how you then manage the situation. But either way, the child needs to feel listened to and there needs to be understanding. So before I look at there's so many areas, it's hard to know where to start. One thing I'm going to talk about is an assembly I once did. I've done more than once, but about how just because of how somebody looks on the outside doesn't necessarily tell the whole story. And what I did, and it's something that's very easy to do, is I got two very good apples, and one of them I injected with various food colourings. So from the outside you couldn't see there was any difference between them. I did it the night before so that it had time for the dye to really go right through the apple. And so I had these two apples, and I got the children to really say lovely things to one of the apples and to really insult the other one, to think of all the horrible things they could say to this other apple. And what then happened is that I then, I said, does it? And they're like, oh, this is silly, it doesn't make a difference. And then I cut open the two apples, and of course the apple where they'd said nice things, it didn't, it looked perfect on the inside. And the apple that they'd been insulting, when I cut it, the result of all the food dye, you could just see this sort of mouldy, disgusting looking apple. And we talked about how just because you can't see that what you're saying is having a negative effect doesn't mean that it isn't. So it's really important that we're kind to each other. And it was an assembly about how we treat each other and the fact that sometimes you can't see the hurt that lies beneath what you're saying and doing. So that's a simple assembly that looks at the whole idea of understanding when it comes to people who have been bullied. So we need to look at how we can help those who are being bullied. Now, I've got a puppet here, as you can see. I've chosen to bring the tortoise because, the tortoise goes right inside his shell, which a lot of people do when they are either not treating other people kindly or are the ones being treated unkindly. And in the same way as you trying to get the child to open up, we can get the tortoise to gradually emerge from the shell, have a look around, and then maybe retreat when something frightens it and gradually come back out. It's actually a surprisingly good puppet to use, and people do talk to it. The children will then talk to this puppet. As I've said before, when you're using puppets, you have to be confident with the puppet yourself. Keep the puppet slightly on the move so that it looks more real. Don't look at the puppet the whole time, so like I'm looking at you now, but I'm not, and then you just suddenly look down and just check it's okay. But it's always moving just slightly, and that's what helps it to look realistic. If you start doing the whole sort of like, here's a puppet, that doesn't get kids to open up. But if you've got it held close to you and doing small movements, then they're likely to talk to it. When it goes inside its shell, I find children say, oh, it's okay, and they try to coax the tortoise out of its shell. They know it's a puppet. I've said this before. They're not stupid, they know it's a puppet, but they still engage with it, and quite often they will say things they might not otherwise have said. So that's the puppet approach. It is very useful to get children to talk. It sort of it distances themselves. They can sort of make their idea a bit more abstract. They can remove themselves from what's happening and put it onto the puppet, and then they can talk more freely. And I found it works very well, especially good in primary, but it does also work in secondary settings. It's about how you use the puppet, the sort of puppet you choose to use, your confidence with the puppet, the situation. But I do find them a very useful tool. So I'm just going to put this one down for a bit now, otherwise all the focus will be on the puppet. So as I said before, it's about really listening so that people feel heard. That is so important. And it's about having safe spaces for this. Okay, so if you start talking to a child and there are other children nearby, they're not going to open up, because that's frightening, that's threatening. There needs to be a place that's a safe space, that's not known only as the place you go to when you are accused of being a bully or having been bullied. There needs to be a space you can go to that is a safe space to visit, so that you can have this open dialogue. So there needs to be a safe space, and there need to be safe people that the children can trust. Now, the importance of that is that if you are just somebody, yes, you listen, you do all of that, but if there's nothing beyond that, just a yes, just don't go near them, that sort of comment, which you do hear. You hear people say, oh, just keep away from each other in the playground. That makes it much harder for the child to feel they're really being listened to. So there are all sorts of things. We need to have safe activities, if you like, so activities at break times where children can go and they are supervised. There is an adult there so they don't feel vulnerable, they feel safe. Feeling safe is a big part of this. But we also need to have, there needs to be seen to be something happening, not just a yes, I heard you, now go out and play. There has to be seen to be the follow-up. What then happens? How is this investigated? How do you look deeper into the situation? What consequences are there for inappropriate behaviour that has actually adversely affected somebody else? Sometimes, bullying's a difficult word, because there is intent and there is not intent, if you like. There was a child who asked an innocent question about somebody's cleft palate. And this child had been, the child who was with the cleft palate had been at the school for ages, and because they'd grown up with all the classmates from nursery, nobody had ever even noticed it even. It was just a part of this child. Then suddenly in I think it was year 2, a new person joined the school and started saying, oh, you've got a funny lip, and all sorts of things that suddenly really upset this child, really upset them. And they were sort of saying, I'm being bullied. So the parents luckily were very understanding. They came in and spoke to the teacher and myself about it. And then we then spoke to the child with the child's parents, the child who had been making the comments. And the child who had been saying it genuinely hadn't realised that what she was saying was hurtful. And this child who'd been saying hurtful things was in floods of tears. And the parents were sort of like, oh, I'm really sorry, I didn't bring our child up to be like this, oh my gosh, There was a dialogue, there was understanding, there was apology, there was a letter of apology written to the child, there was all sorts of stuff. And the child who'd been upset by the comments was no longer upset. That's the important thing. They felt that this had been addressed, the person who had made the comments had been spoken to, had been made to understand why it was hurtful, and they felt much more comfortable with an outcome, and things were better after that. So if you just go in and just punish the child who said the comments that were hurtful, you haven't looked beyond that. She'd never seen a child with a cleft palate before and was just like, whoa, you've got a weird lip, what's wrong with that? Not realising and not thinking it through, because at the end of the day, these were 7-year-olds, they hadn't thought it through. But by having a consequence, having, investigated it, found out what was going on and followed through, it made a huge difference. So that's a concrete example of how it makes a difference. So the child who had been hurt could see the difference, could see what had happened. It happens across all age groups, but not just at school. There's bullying in the workplace. Quite often the person who is a perpetrator of something like that has got something going on in their own life. It could be that they've got a very uncomfortable home life. It could be they've been badly treated themselves. Whilst that needs looking at the same time, that doesn't make the person who's been hurt feel any better. So we need to look at it from both sides. We need to look at yes, you know, we need to investigate why somebody might be acting in a way that's causing harm to other people or hurt to other people. But there has to, even if there's a good reason, if you like, behind it, you know, there's a reason behind it, that doesn't help the person who's been hurt. They still need to see action being taken. They need to see a consequence, that it's not acceptable to behave this way, and we are going to look after you, we're going to keep you safe, and we're going to make sure people realise they can't behave this way. So the whole thing, it's a very complex issue. It's not just a matter of they did that, they got hurt, they get punished, it's over. It's not a matter of they did that, they get hurt, let's keep them separate in the playground. Those are not solutions. Those don't work it out. We need to take it seriously. We need to record incidences. We need to look at whether it is real or perceived. We need to look at the reasons behind, and we need to see consequences for actions, and real actions taken to make somebody who has felt threatened and vulnerable to then feel safe. It's much harder with the internet and cyberbullying, but there are also places of help because of the internet. So, you know, everything is a two-sided thing. It's not black and white. Bullying is not a black and white issue. It's a very serious issue. It needs to be taken seriously. We need to think about the person who is being hurt and the person who is doing the hurting. We need to look at all of it and treat all aspects of it with understanding, listening and action. And I'm going to bring out my little tortoise one more time, just to show you that these little puppets, tiny though they are, can make a huge difference, because there's something safe to talk to. It distances the person slightly from whatever's been happening to them, and it allows them a way of talking. So if you are good with puppets, I recommend strongly that you use them. Thank you.